Andrew saw the little girl waving at him like she always did, but something seemed wrong. One girl didn't look as happy as usual. He could tell by her face that something was off, but he didn't know what trouble he was about to face. In the beginning, Andrew liked seeing the family at the window when he took out the neighbor's trash. The girl's smiles made him happy. But as time passed, he realized there was more going on. His coworkers hinted that things weren't as they seemed. Eventually, he would figure it out. After a few weeks, Andrew noticed more about the family. Once, he saw the girl's mother behind them in the window. He thought she'd be smiling like her kids, but she looked upset instead. He wondered why. While the kids waved happily, their mom didn't seem pleased. He didn't get it. Did she think he was bad for her daughters? He understood her being protective, but everyone was just being friendly. That changed when she made things worse. One day, Andrew was on his usual route, heading by the family's house again. He didn't know what to expect, but he had no idea how things had escalated. When he got home, the girls were waving. He waved back with a smile, but as he did so, he saw the front door open. Standing there was their mother. She beckoned him closer. Was this a trap? Dozens of thoughts raced through his mind as the mother seemed desperate to get him closer. She had a pleading look in her eyes, but he didn't want to get tricked. Yet, a second to spare while one of his coworkers lined up the trash cans. Andrew hesitated, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. If the mother really had a problem and he could help, he decided to stick his nose in business that wasn't his. Andrew approached the woman cautiously. He saw the hope light up in her eyes as he got onto her paving and walked up to the welcome mat. She stared at him and said, "Please take this. It's from my daughters." And she handed him a note. Andrew stared down at the note, but as he looked back up, the door was shut. The woman had run back inside the house. Dread flooded his body. Andrew didn't know what to think. He stared down at the note in his hand, but before he could open it, he was called back to the garbage truck by one of his colleagues. He hid the note in case it was something serious. After his shift had ended, he went home. He pulled out the note and prepared to open it, but he wasn't ready for the scary truth. Andrew sat on the edge of his bed as he unfolded the note carefully. He looked inside and saw squiggly handwriting. It was clear that a young girl had written it. But as he read the words on the page, his heart started racing. Tears fell onto the paper as he kept reading. This was unbelievable. The harrowing truth was far worse than he could have imagined. He knew he had to do something for the family. Andrew Tyler was a modest man who lived in Seattle his whole life. While his classmates reached for the stars, he always found joy in the little things. He wasn't too fussed about what he was doing. He just needed enough to get by. Straight out of high school, he decided to help out his family by getting a job. Andrew looked around the city to try and find something that suited him. Well, he loved hard work, and blue-collar jobs spoke to him above all else. That's when he saw an opening as a municipal cleaning agent. It was just a fancy word for a garbage man, but that didn't bother Andrew. The hours were good, the pay was modest enough, and he went for it. For the next 10 years, he supported his mother and father as they grew old. But eventually, he had to say goodbye to them when they both peacefully passed away. He was lucky enough to inherit their house. Andrew took every small blessing he could. But he had no idea that his faith would be tested down the road. Over the next years, Andrew grew into his own man. This was due to the fact that he lived all by himself. His coworkers were like part of the family. He enjoyed going out with them each day in a different neighborhood. After work, they would always head back to the bar and have a few beers. Life was good for Andrew. Andrew normally paid attention solely to his job. One of the pros and cons of the job was that he was practically invisible. That meant no one ever paid attention to him. They never bothered. But that also meant no one ever interacted with him. But on a day like any other, Andrew was going to see something that he never expected, but he should have ignored it. They were going about their business in a small suburb. Andrew's colleagues collected the trash cans while he prepared to operate the lifter. But then he saw something out of the corner of his eye. There was a window in one of the houses that faced the street. He saw movement and glanced over. He saw 3 young girls in the window. Most people would just stare blankly at him or immediately look away. But the girls did something he didn't expect. They smiled at him and started waving. He was taken aback by the kindness. He stared at them and smiled back before waving and felt good about it. Finally, Someone had paid attention to him. As the week passed, Andrew forgot about the girls he met earlier. But when he returned to the neighborhood to collect trash, he saw them again. They seemed about 2 years apart, with the youngest around 8. He realized he missed something important. Their kindness was brief. Despite this, he and his coworkers appreciated it and looked forward to it each week. Later, Andrew wondered if there was a reason behind their actions. Maybe they weren't just being kind. One day, while waving back at the girls, his coworker Charlie questioned if something seemed off about them. Andrew hadn't thought about it before, but from then on, he paid more attention for any signs. Andrew watched the little girls wave at him just as they had done dozens of times before, but each time it happened, he felt something was off. One girl, in particular, didn't seem as happy as she should be. He could tell by the look on her face that something was wrong, but he had no idea what kind of horrors he was getting into. At first, Andrew looked forward to seeing the family by the window every week when he took the neighborhood's garbage. The 3 little girls' smiles made his day. But as time went on, he started to understand more about what was going on. His colleagues even admitted that even though everything seemed nice on the outside, there was more to it. But soon, he'd understand everything. After a few weeks, Andrew started noticing more details about the family that lived in the house. One day, he saw what he could only assume was the girl's mother standing behind him in the window. He expected to see her smiling along with her children, but it was the complete opposite. She looked upset. What was going on? While their children smiled and waved, their mother didn't look happy at all. He couldn't understand. Why did she disapprove of them waving? Did she think he was in trouble for her daughters? He understood any protective mother, but everyone was just being friendly with no ill intentions. That was until she decided to escalate things. One day, Andrew was on his usual route, heading by the family's house again. He didn't know what to expect, but he had no idea how things had escalated. When he got to their home, the girls were waving. He waved back with a smile, but as he did so, he saw the front door open. Standing there was their mother. She beckoned him closer. Was it a trap? Dozens of thoughts raced through his mind as the mother seemed desperate to get him closer. She had a pleading look in her eyes, but he didn't want to get tricked. He had a second to spare while one of his coworkers lined up the trash cans. Andrew hesitated, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. If the mother really had a problem and he could help, he decided to stick his nose in business that wasn't his. Andrew approached the woman cautiously. He saw the hope light up in her eyes as he got onto her paving and walked up to the welcome mat. She stared at him and said, "Please take this. It's from my daughters," and she handed him a note. Andrew stared down at the note, but as he looked back up, the door was shut. The woman had run back inside the house. Dread flooded his body. Andrew didn't know what to think. He stared down at the note in his hand, but before he could open it, he was called back to the garbage truck by one of his colleagues. He had the note in case it was something serious. After work, he went home and took out the note, but he wasn't ready for what it said. Sitting on his bed, he unfolded it carefully, seeing the messy handwriting of a young girl. As he read, his heart raced, tears dropping onto the paper. The truth was scarier than he'd imagined. He knew he had to help the family. Andrew couldn't wait for his next shift. He called his coworkers, who were eager to assist. They gathered items and headed to the house together. 5 garbage men stood outside with gifts. Earlier, Andrew had told his coworkers about the note from the youngest girl, Casey, who wanted to know his name and drew him a picture. She revealed she had cancer but stayed positive, wanting to cherish every moment. The men brought balloons, chocolates, candy, and toys, pooling $200 to spoil her. The family would never forget their kindness, still smiling and waving during their shifts.